The Senate votes tomorrow on the controversial tax deal between President Obama and Republicans. And this morning, a senior White House advisor is predicting it will pass. Caroline Shively has the latest from Washington. Hey, Caroline.
Hey, Chris. The whip count is looking strong in the Senate, but the House will be the real test of this bill. House Republicans call it a take-it-or-leave-it proposition, while House Democrats are still tinkering with the details. Here's part of Fox News Sunday.
There will be an opportunity for the House to work its will. What the form the bill takes as it comes to the floor is something that will be decided. People are looking at various alternatives.
If the Democrats in the House scuttle this deal, that will be the first thing we do, is prevent these job-killing tax increases, and we'll do it retroactively after the first of the year.
Members have voted not to allow it to reach the floor without scaling back the tax relief for the richest Americans. Right now, the deal keeps the Bush tax cuts going for all Americans, including the wealthiest, for 2 years. It extends unemployment benefits for another year. White House senior advisor David Axelrod called it a tremendous win for the middle class, but acknowledged Democrats' issues.
I think we're going to get strong support on both sides of the aisle. I respect people who are unhappy. We share their view on the upper income tax cuts, on the estate tax. That was a part of the deal, odious though it may be, that we had to accept in order to get all the good things that come along with it. That's the nature of compromise.
The estate tax may be the area where we could see some changes. Right now, states as large as $5 million can pass to heirs without being taxed, plus another $5 million for spouses. House Democrats are trying to scale that back. Chris?
Caroline Shively. Caroline, thanks for that. New Hampshire Senator Gregg, the top Republican on the Senate Budget Committee, says parts of President Obama's tax cut plan will add to the deficit and that there are plenty of Republicans who aren't satisfied with the proposal. Senator Gregg joins me now from his home state of New Hampshire. Senator, overall, what do you think of the tax cut deal that the president worked out with Senate Republicans, and how do you reconcile the fact that at a time when everybody's talking about cutting the deficit, this will add almost another $1 trillion to our debt?
Overall, this is a compromise, and when you govern from compromise. That's the way you govern, basically. You've got a divided government here. Well, not right now, but you will in January. And as a practical matter, the American people expect action. If you were to raise taxes in this economy at this time, you would stifle what is a very anemic recovery and maybe even put us into another recession, at least according to Larry Summers, the chief economic advisor to the president. How do you justify this in the face of the deficits we're facing? I look at this as a two-step dance. There's the short term and there's the long term. In the short term, we have to do things to keep the economy growing because people need jobs, and as the economy grows, obviously that helps our revenues overall as people get jobs. But in the long term, when I'm talking 5, 10, 15 years from now, we've got to put in place a very definitive plan to get the deficit and the debt down, and spending is the issue. And if you look at what the Financial Reform Commission basically reported under Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson, they put in place such a plan. Now, if the Congress will take that up under presidential leadership, we'll get the long-term type of action we need, and this short-term stimulus event of not raising taxes will also be positive in that context.
Let me pick up on that, Senator, if I can. You were a member of the President's Debt Commission, and under the Bowles-Simpson plan, the deficit would be cut by almost $4 trillion over the course of the next decade. Realistically, politically, practically, how much of it do you think Congress will pass or the President will sign in the next year?
Well, my view is we're going to have to pass all of it because we don't have too many choices. We're headed into a fiscal disaster within 3 or 4 years where basically the value of our currency will come under huge pressure. The ability to sell bonds, which are purchased now mostly by foreign countries, places like China, will be under severe pressure, and we'll go into a deep economic hole if we do not put the federal fiscal house in place corrected over the long run. So we can do it now or we can do it later. There used to be that oil filter ad that said you can pay me now or pay me later. If we do it now under something like the Bowles-Simpson plan, which was reasonable and which aggressively moved forward on spending restraint and on tax reform, didn't do as much as it should in the health care area. I agree with that, but it was a very big down payment on getting our deficits and debt and spending under control. If we do it now, it'll be much less painful than if we have to do it in the middle of a major crisis involving our ability to protect our currency and sell bonds.
The president has made this deal with Senate Republicans, and he's talking about adopting some of the Simpson-Bowles plan, the debt commission plan, in his State of the Union address. Your gut feeling, how much of a deficit hawk do you think Barack Obama is going to become in the new year?
I think the president has a great opportunity to govern here. And this compromise that was reached on the tax issue shows that he's willing to move in that direction. It also shows the Republican leadership is willing to move in that direction. There are some very substantive things we can do. We can do energy reform. We can do tax reform. We can do spending restraint on the discretionary side of the ledger. All three of those things should be able to be done in a bipartisan way and done aggressively by this administration working with Republicans in the House and in the Senate and with Democratic members of the Congress also. Those would be major steps forward to getting fiscal responsibility in place. Obviously, the health care fight is going to be a different issue because there's so much invested, especially by the White House, in that bill that was passed, which I think was a really poor bill and which aggravates our deficits dramatically. But there are big areas like energy, like tax reform, like discretionary spending restraint, where there is significant and I think fertile ground for agreement.
Senator, let me pick up on one of those, because the new flavor of the month in this town, I don't have to tell you, is tax reform and the debt commission plan that you voted for, which would eliminate or reduce up to $1 trillion in tax deductions, including the home mortgage deduction. And the result of reducing and eliminating all of those deductions is that you could lower the marginal tax rates dramatically, so that the top rate, instead of being 35%, would be somewhere between 23 and 28%. How likely do you think that is to really happen?
Well, you know, that rose out of a proposal by myself and Senator Wyden, who's a progressive from Oregon, and we worked for 2 years and we reached this compromise where we essentially did what the Bowles-Simpson Commission proposed, only they put it on steroids and eliminated all the deductions and exemptions. But this is the right debate. Instead of talking about raising rates from 35 to 39 or 39 to 42, let's talk about totally rewriting our tax laws along the way that President Reagan and Senator Bradley did in '86, where you eliminate a lot of deductions and exemptions that have gone into the code for special interests, and as a result, you significantly reduce tax rates on everyone and cause people to invest for the purposes of creating economic activity and jobs rather than invest for the purposes of avoiding taxes. And you also get a fairer tax law, a simpler tax law, and a tax law which says to the world, come here and invest. Don't go overseas from if you're a United States company and invest.
Senator Judd Gregg of New Hampshire, we're going to have to leave it there. Senator Gregg, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us today, sir.